We've got a sweet GT 350 on deck for Muscle Car of the Week. The 1969 and 70 Shelby GT 350 and GT 500 cars are pretty unique because the 1970 version is kind of a car that never was. So the interesting thing about the 70 Shelbys is that these weren't produced in 1970. All the 70 Shelby cars were 69 model year cars that were carried over, and under the guidance of the FBI, Ford was able to assign 1970 Shelby VINs to 1969 cars. That's just kind of a wild historical thing because I don't think that's ever happened before, where unsold 69 cars became the 1970 model year cars. And there's one little tell in this one. If you extend the seat belt, there's a date code on the seat belt that says 69, but everything else is 1970. But the whole purpose of this car had changed from what the original Shelbys were. You know, back in 65, 66, when the Shelby GT 350s first started hitting the scene, these cars were very lightweight, basic race cars for the street. The interiors were gutted, the suspension systems were redesigned, they had high-performance engines, they had high-performance brakes, they had minimal creature comforts because these were cars that were designed to be run on a track. But by the end of the 60s, the Shelby brand had evolved, or some might say devolved, into what we see here. Shelby was no longer producing the cars on his own. They were being built kind of internally through Ford, and Ford realized they had a bunch of different Mustang options now. Now you had the Mach 1 series, which was the luxury car. They had the Boss 302 and Boss 429, which were more of the race cars. So the Shelby needed a place to fit in, and they turned it more into a luxury performance package instead of being a stripped-down race car for the street. Shelby styling has always been kind of unique, and in 1970, these cars appear to be longer than a regular Mustang because they are. The nose has been extended several inches. You can really see it in the hood, but the headlight and grille surround is also unique. There's a special bright trim on the front, and the hood is really obvious that it's been extended. This hood is made of fiberglass, and if you look closely, you can see there's 5 distinct scoops in the hood. These are called NACA ducts, and the point of these was to let cold air in and hot air out. And a detail on these hoods is that the Ford engineers used the regular steel hood hinges and springs, even though the hood's fiberglass, and it tends to pull up on the fiberglass hood and bow it in the middle, so it's kind of tricky to make these things fit right. The Shelby wheels are unique. It's a cast aluminum wheel with a special center cap. Moving through the car, there's a styling bar. It's not really a roll bar, but it gives that appearance right behind the driver's headrest here. And then on the front of the quarter panel, you see a scoop mounted there. The rear treatment on the car has a fiberglass deck lid and fiberglass quarter extensions, which give it kind of a neat little ducktail kick-up. And in back, there's a waffle pattern trim that goes the whole width with the Shelby name in the middle. You've got a pair of Thunderbird sequential taillights that blink in succession, and below the bumper you've got a center-mounted dual exhaust tip, which kind of round out the rear of the package. So Shelby styling is unique from every angle of the car. And these cars were appointed very well. I mean, if you look at the interior of the car, the first thing you might notice is the Mach 1 style comfort weave seats. The color combination in this car has white seats and door panels in the white rear seat. The dashboard is wood-grained in the 2 coves where the gauge cluster lives and where the clock lives on the other side. And there's numerous little details that indicate this is a Shelby car. There's a Shelby Cobra snake in the steering wheel, which is also the rim blow horn, where you squeeze the wheel and the horn blows. The passenger side has the clock in its cove, which is reminiscent of the Mach 1, but below the clock you see a Cobra GT 350 badge. The car has full carpeting and full sound deadening, unlike the original GT 350 cars. A couple things that make it different from the regular Mustangs: in the dash you see a 140 mile an hour speedometer. At the front of the console are a pair of gauges, which you wouldn't find installed in the factory Mach 1 or Boss cars. And towards the back of the console, you see a couple of racy-looking toggle switches, one of which controlled the fog lights, and the other one controlled auxiliary illumination in the cockpit. So that's kind of unique. This car also has Shelby branded door sills. When you open the door, you're greeted with that Shelby American logo every time you get into the car. Now, although it's not the fire-breathing Shelby of the previous cars, it still was powered by a 351 cubic inch V8, which was new for the 69 year, which of course morphed into the 1970 year, so this car still has that. It's got an Autolite 4-barrel carburetor, and it's making about 10.7 to 1 compression, which translates to 290 advertised horsepower at 4,800 RPM. And that 351 was a little torquier with a little more displacement and a longer stroke, so it's 385 foot-pounds of torque at 3,200 RPM. A 4-speed manual transmission was the standard gearbox in the 1970 GT350. There was an optional close ratio 4-speed manual. This car has an FMX, which is a 3-speed automatic, and you could get the GT500 with a 428, and that one had a C6 automatic behind it. Interestingly, you could only get air conditioning in an automatic car, and I think this is one of the first times you could ever get air conditioning in a Shelby. Again, leading into that new luxury feel of Shelby cars, but this one is an automatic, but it does not have air conditioning. It does, however, have the 9-inch rear axle in the back, and previous Shelbys, again, were known for their high-performance suspension, stiffer spring rates, bigger brakes, and performance wheels and tires. But the suspension and brake package is basically standard Mach 1 stuff. You've got 11.3-inch rotors in front and 10-inch diameter, 2-inch wide drum brakes in the back. They do have a unique exhaust system with a cast iron manifold that merges the pipes in the back where they exit in the center of the car. You'll notice a little black smoke trail coming up the tailpan on our car. That's because this thing's running kind of rich right now, but there's stories that some of these cars actually caught fire because that hot exhaust came up and interacted with the vented fuel cap mounted right above and caused these things to burn. So eventually Ford changed that to a non-vented cap. But just kind of an interesting thing, something that you wouldn't have predicted when they styled the car. Now, although this car looks to be in almost new condition, it is showing about 83,000 miles on the odometer, which I think is great. It means that people were allowed to get behind the wheel of this thing and drive it and enjoy it with the top down. And if you can get past the fact that the 69 and 70 Shelby cars really weren't the race cars that the earlier ones were, but really appreciate the car for what it is, it's a great looking car, it's got nice road manners, it's comfortable and fun to drive, plus the top going down and the Shelby name on the side, it really makes an enjoyable package, and I love this orange color coupled with the black and white interior. So which generation of Shelby is your favorite? You can share it with us on our Facebook page or website at MuscleCarOfTheWeek. And don't forget the YouTube channel where you can push the subscribe button to never miss an episode of our show.